Today we're continuing our look at the Old Testament in the book of Exodus. And where we left off last week, there were a couple of questions given. I rushed past this particular point. Brother Tharp decided rushing was not appropriate. But no, the question was a good question. As you can tell, I intended to go into this a little bit more, and in the interest of time, decided to just kind of go quickly through it. But today we're going to just stop and take a look at it. As I thought about how to address your question, I thought about the reason I had highlighted it in the first place, and it is an important aspect to everything else that's going to come. We need to understand this. And so we're going to take a moment to take a look at it, and then we'll resume our class as the time permits. But this is an important thing, so now it's going to be an expanded look at it. Everybody can thank Brother Tharp appropriately after class for that. Brother Young also had a question. I'm going to try to address that. I mentioned maybe in another class, but I'll try to address that today as there's time as well. But it'll be a shorter look at it. And the reason is a lot of it is going to be addressed over time. It's revealed over time. And so we haven't gotten to some of those aspects. So I'm going to attempt to give a short answer to your question from last week, Brother Young, pertaining to the superseding of the Ten Commandments and its necessity. All right. So starting with Exodus 24, verses 1 through 11. Exodus 24, verses 1 through 11, and talking about how the covenant was confirmed with blood. The reason, as I thought about it more and more, it was really good that Brother Tharp slowed me down there, because there's just so much involved in that point. When I was originally preparing the class, I wanted to say a whole lot about it, but it's meant to be an overview class. But even in an overview class, we have to sometimes stop and take a look at these crucial points, because it's going to continue to be relevant as God holds Israel responsible, entirely responsible for the covenant that they made and they broke. And it's something that we have to understand today. We need to understand what has happened. This is not some haphazard plan that may come together, may work out. God knew what he was doing. The fault and the problem with the plan was never with the plan itself, but with Israel. The plan did what it was supposed to do. That's not us revising history. It is written in prophecy. So we need to understand that. So let's deal with this idea of it being confirmed with blood. In Exodus, we'll start with verse number 1. And he said unto Moses, Come up unto the Lord, thou, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship ye afar off. And Moses alone shall come near the Lord, but they shall not come nigh, neither shall the people go up with him. And Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord, and all the judgments, and all the people answered with one voice and said, All the words which the Lord hath said, we will do. That was their promise. That was their statement. In 24, I'm just going to keep reading down to verse 7. And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, and rose up early in the morning, and builded an altar under the hill, and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the children of Israel, which offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto the Lord. And Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And he took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people. And they said, all that the Lord hath said, we will do, and be obedient. So it started with God's word. This is the important element to note here. In verse number 3, he says, Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the judgments, and the people answered that they will do it. And in verse 7, he took the book of the covenant. Notice what he calls it. It's the book of the covenant. So when we're talking about this covenant being confirmed, it was a written covenant. The book of the covenant, and read in the audience of all the people, and they said, all that the Lord hath said, we will do, and be obedient. Brother Tharp.
This is one of those times where you're reading 7 verses and it sounds like just a day or two. It sounds like he went up, talked to the Lord, came down, told people what happened, and then they did the altar. Well, in the middle there it says he wrote down all that the Lord said. That's not going to be done in just a few minutes.
Yes.
So there's some time span here, and he writes it all, and they confirmed it, like you said, when he first came down and orally told them, and then after he wrote it down, they confirmed it again, and that's where we see the blood.
And so we see the confirmation coming. We haven't gotten there yet. What we're dealing with right now is the covenant. This is what you're agreeing to. And so that's the revelation of terms. When we agree to something, we can say all day, you know what, we're going to agree to this business. But until we have the terms hammered out and we finally confirm those terms, we haven't really entered into a covenant. It's really more of an intent. They said, we're going to do everything, but God reveals all the terms of the covenant. And now they're saying, yes, we're willing to do this. And so God is going to require more than just that. So God expects the understanding of everybody that they're entering into this covenant, and he expects their obedience. They understand that. What is their response? Look, all the words that he said, we will do. So obedience being required is understood. Now, again, I make the analogy to like contract law. A lot of times people will try to back out of a contract and say, well, I didn't know what I was signing. Well, you signed the contract. We don't require just a contract to be revealed. Here's a contract, right? We require something more, some confirmation. And then it's on you. Now, if you've ever gone to buy a car, you know that contract is quite long. I've sat there and read the entire contract. They're used to you just signing. And they had to just leave me to read the terms of the contract. It's just what I do. I don't mind reading. So anyway, it's what I do. But being held responsible, whether you've read it or not, when you sign, you are saying, I'm agreeing. Right? So there's confirmation. We understand it. We understand this. I emphasize it because only with the Bible do we act like we don't understand this. We don't get this. So.
Dion?
Yes.
Is Moses' taking half the blood and sprinkling it on the altar the blood that we're talking about at this point? Is that?
That is, and
okay.
That's the next slide.
Okay.
So Israel verbally bound themselves to the covenant. So 4 through 8, where he talks about, and going down to 8, and Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, behold, well, let's see, let's go through 4 through 8. 5. And he sent young men of the children of Israel which burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto the Lord, which offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto the Lord. So notice the type of offering that was being given here. It was a blood offering. It was a burnt offering, but it was considered a peace offering. At this point, this is not a sin offering. Okay, that's not what it is. Now, so again, there are different offerings given at different times. Why is this not a sin offering? This is a covenant offering. So God is very specific on the type of offerings that are required. Now, in this covenant, Israel is going to be required to give what? Sin offering. He's going to deal with their sin, and that's part of the covenant. But the covenant itself here wasn't the sin offering itself. So blood is being utilized. He says that they offered the peace offering. Moses took half the blood and put it in basins, and half the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And then in verse number 8, Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, Behold, the blood of the covenant which the Lord hath made with you concerning all these words. So he puts the blood on the people. How many of you are willing to have blood put on you? And the word sprinkled, by the way, please don't understand it to be this idea. That's what we think of as sprinkled. It's thrown on you. That's what's happening. He's throwing blood onto the altar. He throws blood onto the people. What does the altar represent? God's side. And then what is the people directly are in this covenant. So you've got the two parties of the covenant being confirmed with blood, right? We can see that, right? That's the blood offering. That's the confirmation. And it is absolutely important for us to know. Sinful people could not enter into a covenant with God without sacrifice. Now, this doesn't mean that this was the sin offering. It means that even here, in entering into a covenant with God, blood was required. The blood demonstrated the seriousness of the covenant commitment. What represents that now? When we enter into an agreement, what represents the seriousness? Yes.
Well, today in legalese, it's our signature.
It's our signature.
But there was a time where you pricked your finger and you used your blood for a signature, and that's within a couple hundred years of now. It gives a lot of meaning to that song, There's Power in the Blood.
Yep, indeed.
God has always used blood, and I guess blood represents life. You know, from the Garden of Eden to the start of the law to Christ and all the sacrifices that happened in between. It's not to be taken lightly, I don't think.
Indeed. We'll get there. I think I should start putting my classes together in reverse order. But I like to go step by step by step. But yes, indeed, the seriousness is there. Just like then, people didn't always take the sign of seriousness as being serious. One of the people I know is dealing with an issue of a person breaking a lease and just decided they're going to leave. They're not going to fulfill the term of their lease. But you have a signed agreement. Well, yeah, but I'm not going to do that anymore. And that's it. Just a really flippant attitude toward it. And we see this a lot nowadays. I think one of the questionable things that has changed in our society is an actual physical signature. You know, docu-signing things makes it very easy. Yes.
Well, and I think it's been cheapened by every piece of software we have to touch. They have a 20 to 30, 40 page document, and everybody scrolls to the bottom and just hits accept. society has taught us not to even treat contracts very seriously, yet the law still does.
Yes, well, some of those, there's a lot of questionable nature to whether those are binding, because you don't get them often until after you've purchased something. And so that's very, very questionable. It's still being challenged today. But notwithstanding, we understand when we sit down and sign something, especially those of us that are older, I think have more of an appreciation when we sit down and sign something. That's meant to be, okay, you're really ready to enter into this agreement, right? Look, if somebody's going to throw blood on me, I've got to be very sure. I think I might wait a minute. Let me think about this. You know, I'm not squeamish at all, but I'm not for anyone throwing blood on me for any reason. There was a seriousness that they understood. Why would that be so serious to them? Because the requirement of blood, I mean, these were valuable animals. You know, they weren't just going to Ralph's and being shocked over the price of meat. These were valuable animals that were being sacrificed. So there was direct value perceived that we cannot understand with just a wave of our pen. Even those of us that are older that took our signature to be a little bit more important. Even we cannot understand the magnitude that they would understand this, because there's direct value, personal value connected with this. Brother Thar.
It's in the word, sacrifice. And sometimes we don't quite understand that, but there's a cost. There's a cost to entering a contract. There's a cost to, when you sin, you have to pay a consequence. We live in a society that is relatively consequence-free, which is a shame. You know, you're not allowed to spank your kids anymore, these things. Consequences is what teaches us. You know, we do something, and if we have to pay a consequence, oh, I shouldn't do that. It's how we learn. So the fact that, you know, we take 3 signatures, I think, fairly, our marriage license, when we buy a home, when we buy a car. But other than that, you know.
Yes, I wasn't just answering emails or messages with my phone. Brother Tharp made me think of another class, so there are consequences to his comments, and that is that you all get another class. So thank Brother Tharp appropriately.
Gonna get me beat up after class.
But no, all true. Hebrews 9. Let's see. Yes, Hebrews 9, verse 18. Whereupon neither the first testament was dedicated without blood, for when Moses had spoken every precept to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop, and sprinkled both the book and all the people, saying, This is the blood of the testament which God hath enjoined unto you. Moreover, he sprinkled the blood, both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry, and almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood there is no remission. And so just entering into the covenant, the agreement, God required blood. That's what we're seeing there. That covenant in the same passage we see talks about what it brings in, fellowship with God. And all of this, like I said, is important for understanding the whole Old Testament, especially as it relates to the New Testament. Then went Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet, as it were, paved work of sapphire stone, and as it were, body of heaven in his clearness. And upon the nobles, the children of Israel, he laid not his hand. also they saw God and did eat and drink. So we see a fellowship of sorts, right? That happens with God. Who saw God? Yeah, well, he says they saw God. So we're not confused. We're not. This doesn't mean they physically saw the face of God. I mean, I know that's where some of the confusion comes in, and even Moses didn't see the face of God. So when we're not talking about that, but they saw the presence of God. Now, what form that is, we don't know because the Bible doesn't tell us. But what they saw, they understood was God. Whatever manifestation that God allowed them to see, they knew, here's the important thing, they knew they were in the presence of God. Not just that God exists somewhere, that they were in the presence of God. So this wasn't just Moses on the mount talking with God. They're all in fellowship with God. Yes.
And Moses may not have seen the direct face of God, but he was close enough that when the people came down, they knew he had been in the presence of God. He was white and changed. So he was close. You may not have seen his face, but he was close, and it was enough for the people to recognize, just seeing him, that he was close to God.
Very good point. And so now what that does is it lets us know that when we talk about being in the presence of God, there are different things we can talk about, right? Different levels, different elements, different responsibilities and roles. Roles is the word I'm looking for, that people have played and then entered into the presence of God. We all believe we are in the presence of God, but not in this way. Not like this, right? So we can understand there's different elements of that. But we see here, just if we were to take this just as a contextual reading, we see an evolution happening of them receiving God's word, it being written, them agreeing to it, and it being confirmed. Their agreement, the covenant itself between the two parties, being sealed with blood. Then that opening the door to God. That's what we need to understand is going on. So it opened the door to fellowship with God. Yes.
What portion of the promise to Abraham and Jacob is being confirmed here? Not the whole thing, obviously, because I don't believe that happens till Jesus comes. Is this, they're now a great nation?
This is just one step along the path of it. It's not any particular element of it, because the fulfillment of that whole thing is not going to come until much, much later. This is one step into it. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment as well. Or hopefully we'll talk about that in a moment. But, I mean, it's a good question. It does tie into Brother Young's question, though. So we understand that's what this covenant was intended to do, bring people closer. Peace offerings and covenant meals emphasized the relationship with God. Other covenants involving blood. Exodus 24, 1 through 11, that's not right. Genesis 15, I'm sorry. Genesis 15, 9 through 18. Genesis 15, 9 through 18. And he said unto him, Take me a heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all these, and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another, but the birds divided he not. And when the fowls came down upon the carcass, Abram drove them away. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with a great substance, and thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. And it came to pass that when the sun went down, and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace, and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. In the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. Notice blood was involved in that covenant. Yes.
I don't want to. Wasn't there a sacrifice with Noah and God's covenant with the rainbow?
Absolutely. That's the first time after the flood we see an altar being built. I figured I wouldn't have time, so I didn't put everything, but very good. I mean, so Abraham's covenant, oh, there it was. Genesis 15:9. The Passover, we understand, is a blood covenant, right? When he made the agreement, notice what that first covenant was. I'm going to pass over your children if this blood is upon the doorposts. Now, if the blood wasn't there, you did not enter into an agreement, and your child is going to die. That's what happened there. The new covenant, bringing us to today, is confirmed with the blood of Christ. So, with the new covenant, Matthew 26, 27, and 28, and he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, Drink ye all of it, for this is the blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sin. We see the same, similar in Luke 22, verse 20. This cup is the New Testament in my blood, which is shed for you. And 1 Corinthians 11, 25. After the same manner also he took the cup when he had supped, saying, This cup is the New Testament in my blood. This do ye as oft as ye drink it in remembrance of me. So Jesus sealed the covenant with his own blood. We're talking about the New Testament covenant. His blood brings the remission of sin. Now, this is the perfect blood that had not been seen before now. No blood offering, no sin offering was ever like this offering. This offering offers blood for all of those that lived, live now, and will live in the future. That's the nature of this sin offering. It's different, but it's consistent with what we see. And so the covenant was confirmed with blood. We remember this covenant through the Lord's Supper. The idea here is Jesus brought in a new covenant with mankind. And this is ultimately fulfilling the promise to Abraham. Through your seed, all nations will be blessed. And so Jesus brings in that. Now we enter into that covenant. How? We're baptized into it, right? Jesus' blood was shed. When we are baptized, we are joining him in that death. Now, how we started this with this covenant. Here's the word. Here's what's expected of you. And the people said, I agree, and blood being thrown on them. And we're going through the exact same thing. This is why when people want to rush people to be baptized, and withhold things. It doesn't follow the pattern. It's just not a good practice for us to have. Because the idea is people understand what they're getting into. They're counting the cost. That's what the Bible says. They understand and they are agreeing to it. In Isaiah, when thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin. Each and every one of us has a responsibility to agree to the covenant. That's why this is so important, because it's going to be the model we see all through, and we saw it before, it just wasn't explained. So notice the First Testament, the Old Testament, is revealing things that were already in place, that were already there. So we understand the New Testament is revealing more, but sometimes we fail to realize the Old Testament was designed to reveal some things as well. Brother Tharp?
It really makes you question, when you study the Bible, how anybody can think that just saying a few words in your mind and saying I believe in God is enough. Because that's not the pattern the Bible shows us.
It's not the pattern it started. It's not the pattern it continued to show us even with Christ. So, I'm always fascinated with that look at pre-flood days, because we're given such a small glimpse of that. Was there the same idea of a covenant made between them and God? We know sacrifices were offered. We know there was word given, but we don't have any indication beyond that. What we're seeing in pre-flood days, God showing man what happens when he's left to his own devices. He has an idea of righteousness, of what's good and bad. God condemns them because he says their thoughts were only evil continually. But we don't see him leading them in the same way that he does with Israel. And so one picture we get is, left to their own, all mankind is corrupt. Now, obviously that's not true, because some found grace in God's eyes. But 8 souls were saved. Out of all of those people, 8 souls were saved. So that seems to be a picture of God demonstrating, here's what's going to happen, just left to your own. And then with Israel, we see before the flood, the Bible is focused on the whole world, talking about the whole world. Post-flood, we see a focus almost right away with Noah and his family. There's a focus, and that focus continues through up to Abraham. And it's through your family, all nations. And there's a focus on one family all throughout the Old Testament. Everyone else is peripheral. We don't know all the details of how God dealt with those families. We just don't. But we see a focus where God is teaching us something, and we should pay attention to what God is teaching us by leading this one family. Yes?
But just through Jonah, we can surmise that God dealt with other nations because he had to go correct them. Now, how do you correct somebody unless they have guidance in the first place and they go astray? So we can surmise that God was dealing with other people, not just Israel, but the focus in the written word is on Israel.
Indeed. Again, directly by inference with Jude, we see that same idea. So anyway, that's very true. We just don't know the details, and anyone who would pretend otherwise is going far beyond the Bible. All we have are these little glimpses. So we know God dealt with them. We just don't know how. I can't say that they all agreed to a covenant and then descended into this. It seems to be a picture that they knew what God expected of them, but were left to their own and descended. Then God gives us a picture of man being led by God and his continued rebellion, God's continued mercy, and how God is the key to success in all of it. That's the story of Israel. When Israel followed God, there was success. When they disobeyed God, and that seems to be a thousands of years history to help us understand how we ought to live and how we ought to accept God in our lives today. Now, I want to connect that and just try to give a brief comment on Brother Young's question. No, we're going to talk a lot more about this in the future. Let's see, where are my notes? So, the need to fulfill it, and you mentioned the Ten Commandments specifically, but I'm expanding that to the law because that's what God talks about. Remember, the Ten Commandments is an aspect of the law, and what God is replacing is the law. So to understand that, looking at the original plan, now the Lord said unto Abraham, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So he makes the promise right from the start, all families. And still somehow a lot of times when we read the Abraham's promise, we focus only on Israel. That is not the promise. That was the vehicle to get us there. But the promise always was through thy seed, all families are going to be blessed. So that's the original plan. Jeremiah 31, beginning at verse 31. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was a husband unto them, saith the Lord. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, saith the Lord, I will put my law in their inward parts, and write it in their hearts, and will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. Thus saith the Lord, which giveth the sun for a light by day, and the ordinance of the moon and the stars for a light by night, which divideth the sea when the waves thereof roar. The Lord of hosts is his name. If those ordinances depart from before me, saith the Lord, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever. Look, Israel was never intended to be forever. Now, the challenge we have, and the reason I say some of this, I want to put till later, is because what we think of as the Old Testament, we have it all. But they didn't have all of this initially. They had the first 5 books, and then you start to see the prophets writing. We get more history revealed, and then we get prophecies revealed over hundreds of years. And so here we're seeing something revealed later, but it's about the original plan. This is the plan. This is what's going to happen. It's still prophecy. I'm going to replace this whole covenant. You're going to have a new covenant. And in that covenant, the big distinction he makes is, I will remember their sins no more. Actual remission of sin. No more rolling over for another year. No more continuing to offer a scapegoat. No more of that. It is actual remission of sin. And he tells them this hundreds of years before Christ is manifest in the flesh. We can see that. So, Acts 10, 1 through 4, when there was a certain man of Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian band, a devout man and one that feared God with all his house, which gave much alms to the people and prayed to God always. He saw in a vision, evidently about the 9th hour of the day, an angel of God coming in to him and saying unto him, Cornelius. When he looked on him, he was afraid and said, What is it, Lord? And he said unto him, Thy prayers and thine alms are come up for a memorial before God. We see this being realized. Now, why is this happening so long after the death of Jesus? The new covenant is entered into. But one thing you see with God is he continues to work with man over a period of time. And here he brings in the Gentiles. Now we see the ultimate fulfillment of that plan that was made with Abraham to bring in all families. And in doing so, Peter has a vision. And in that vision, he realizes, look, all of these things that were forbidden to eat aren't forbidden to eat. Forbidden to eat where? Where were they forbidden? In the law. What does this signify? That is not the case anymore. He says, don't call anything unclean that I have cleaned. So we see a complete removal of the law. And yet they still don't understand. We see them dealing with it in Galatians, with the Galatian saints, dealing with Peter and the other disciples that had come and would constrain them by the law. So we see God is continuing to work with man through the New Testament. So don't let that put you off. This is the way God has continued to operate. He's always been a merciful God. And so the fact that he worked with man and continues to work with us until this day shouldn't be something of surprise. So we're going to go more into that, as you can see, as we go on. We're going to get to the books of Jeremiah and the books of Isaiah, and we're going to spend a little bit of time there as well. We won't spend a lot of time in all of the minor prophets. They're all important, but we're going to spend a little bit of time in Isaiah and Jeremiah because obviously they tell a lot about what was about to come. All right, but for now we're going to continue with this foundational part, which is really the early parts of the